At my 65th birthday party, my daughter-in-law showed up wearing my wedding dress. A day earlier, I had discovered she was having an affair with my husband. During the party, I decided to expose the whole truth. I pulled an envelope from my purse that left everyone in shock. My husband opened it, trembling, and fainted after reading the first line. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end. I'd love to see how far it has traveled." 65 years I'd lived, and in a single afternoon, I discovered my entire life had been a lie. It was Friday afternoon when I decided to go up to the attic to look for some decorations for my birthday party the next day. I had planned an intimate celebration with family. Nothing extravagant, just the people I loved most gathered at home. Arthur, my husband of 40 years, had insisted it be something special. "It's your 65th birthday, Abigail," he had told me that morning while sipping his coffee. "You deserve to be celebrated like the queen you are." What irony that he used that word, queen. If I had known what I was about to discover that afternoon, I would have told him that queens can be dethroned too. I climbed the attic stairs carefully, my knees protesting the years of Bauke. The October afternoon light filtered through the small window, creating dancing shadows among the dusty boxes that held the memories of a lifetime. I was looking for the set of fine china I had inherited from my mother, the one we only used on special occasions. That's when I saw it. My wedding dress was hanging from an old rack, but it wasn't how I had left it. Someone had taken it out of its protective cover. The ivory lace, which I had treasured for 4 decades, was wrinkled, as if someone had recently worn it. My heart began to beat faster. I approached with trembling hands. Then the scent hit me like a slap in the face. It wasn't my perfume. It was that sweet, cloying scent that April, my daughter-in-law, always wore. The fragrance I had begun to associate with discomfort ever since she married my youngest son 5 years ago. April, my 32-year-old daughter-in-law, with her calculated smiles and her poisoned comments disguised as concern, the same one who always found a way to make me feel like an old nuisance in my own home, the one who whispered things in my son's ear that made him look at me with increasingly cold eyes. But there was something else. On the floor, next to the full-length mirror we kept in the attic, I found something that made the world spin beneath my feet. A handkerchief. But it wasn't just any handkerchief. It was the navy blue silk one I had given Arthur for our last anniversary. The one I had embroidered with his initials with my own arthritic hands. The pieces began to fit together in my mind like a gruesome puzzle. What was Arthur's handkerchief doing in the attic? Why had April been wearing my wedding dress? And more importantly, why were they here together? I sat down on an old box, feeling as if all the blood had been drained from my body. 40 years of marriage. 40 years believing Arthur was the honorable man I fell in love with when I was 25. 40 years building a family, sacrificing my dreams, taking care of everyone but myself. Then I heard voices coming from downstairs. I immediately recognized April's laugh, that sharp laugh that had always seemed forced to me. But there was something different about it now. It was genuine, intimate, the laugh of a woman who feels secure, desired. I went down the stairs in silence. Each step was torture. My legs felt like lead, but something inside me needed to confirm what I already knew in the bottom of my heart. I stopped in the hallway, hidden behind the wall that separated the living room from the dining room. "You shouldn't have left the handkerchief up there," I heard April's voice. It had that playful, scolding tone that mistresses use with their men. "Sorry, love," Arthur replied. That word, love, spoken with a tenderness I hadn't heard directed at me in years. It's just that, when I saw you in the dress, I couldn't think of anything else. My dress. They had defiled my wedding dress. "Tomorrow is going to be the perfect revenge," April continued, a smile in her voice. "Seeing her face when I show up wearing her precious dress at her own party. After everything she's put me through these years, she deserves this and more. Are you sure this is a good idea?" "She might suspect something," Arthur asked, but his tone wasn't one of sincere concern. It was excitement. He was enjoying this. "Please, Arthur, that old woman is so lost in her own world, she doesn't even notice when it rains. Besides, it's about time she knows who really runs this family." Old woman. She called me an old woman, as if my 65 years were a contagious disease, as if the years I had dedicated to raising her husband, to caring for Arthur when he was sick, to keeping this family together, were worth nothing. "You're right," Arthur replied. "It's time for things to change around here. I'm tired of pretending. 40 years of pretending to love me." I walked away silently, went up to my room, and closed the door carefully. I sat on the bed I had shared with Arthur for decades, and for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't crumble, like the helpless old woman they thought I was. Instead, something cold and calculated awakened within me, a determination I didn't know I possessed. If they wanted to play a game, we would play, but the rules would be mine. I opened my bedside table drawer and took out my phone. I had calls to make and plans to draw up. My 65th birthday party was going to be memorable, but not for the reasons Arthur and April imagined. As I dialed the first number, a cold smile formed on my lips. They had seriously underestimated this old woman. Tomorrow, they would find out exactly what Abigail Miller was capable of when pushed too far. I didn't sleep a single hour that Friday night, but it wasn't from pain or sadness. It was pure adrenaline coursing through my veins. For the first time in decades, I had a clear purpose, and I wasn't going to let emotions ruin what I had to do. At 6 a.m, while Arthur snored beside me as if nothing had happened, I got up quietly and went down to the kitchen. I made coffee, toast, and scrambled eggs, exactly as I had done every morning for the past 40 years. But this time was different. This time it was a performance. Arthur came down at 7:30, as always. He came up behind me and gave me a kiss on the cheek, the same routine kiss he had given me thousands of times. But now I knew it was fake. It was all fake. "Good morning, my love," he said, pouring coffee into his favorite mug, the one I had given him with the phrase, "World's best dad." I wanted to smash it against the wall. "Good morning, Arthur," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a baby. I'm excited for your party today. It's going to be a very special day." Special. Of course, it was going to be special, just not in the way he imagined. "What time are the kids getting here?" I asked, referring to our 3 children. "Edward and Catherine will be here at 3. Michael and April are coming earlier to help with the preparations." Michael and April, my youngest son, and the woman who had slept with his father in my attic, wearing my wedding dress. The irony was so cruel, it almost made me laugh. After breakfast, Arthur went to the grocery store to pick up the last few things for the party. The moment I heard his car pull away, I took out my phone and dialed the number I had been waiting all night to call. Mrs. Miller, this is Patricia Reed, private investigator. Patricia was the daughter of an old friend of mine from my book club. When her mother had told me her daughter specialized in marital investigations, I never thought I would one day need her services. How wrong I was. Patricia, my dear, I need you to come over today. It's urgent. 2 hours later, Patricia was sitting in my living room, a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a digital recorder in her hand. Mrs. Miller, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw and heard yesterday, she said in a professional tone. I told her everything, the dress, the handkerchief, the conversation I had overheard. Patricia took meticulous notes. Do you have any physical evidence? She asked. We went up to the attic together. The dress was still there, now carelessly put away. Patricia took pictures from every angle and collected a few fibers for analysis. Mrs. Miller, I'm going to be direct with you. If what you're telling me is true, this goes beyond a simple affair. The use of the wedding dress suggests something much deeper and more disturbed. What do you mean? April isn't just having an affair with your husband. She's trying to replace you symbolically. This is a calculated and deliberate humiliation. Her words confirmed what I had felt in my gut. This wasn't blind passion. It was pure cruelty. What do you need me to do? I asked. Act normal today. I'll be monitoring from your neighbor's house. Mrs. Gonzalez has already given me permission. I have surveillance equipment that can capture audio and video from there. We need additional evidence. At 11 in the morning, Michael and April arrived with bags of decorations and flowers. April was wearing a navy blue dress that enhanced her youthful figure. She looked radiant, like a woman in love, only she was in love with her mother-in-law's husband. Grandma Abby, my 8-year-old granddaughter Sophia, shouted, running towards me with open arms. She was the daughter of Michael and April, my little light in the midst of so much darkness. Hello, my sweetie, I said, hugging her tightly. What hurt me most about this whole situation was thinking about how it would affect this innocent child. Hello, Mom. April greeted me with that fake smile I could now see right through. I hope you're ready for a memorable party. Oh, believe me, it will be, I replied, maintaining my smile. It will be a party no one will ever forget. For the next 2 hours, I watched every move, every look, every gesture between Arthur and April. It was like watching a macabre play where I was the only one in the audience who knew the real script. April helped decorate the dining room, hanging gold garlands and placing candles on the table. Every time Arthur passed by her, their hands would accidentally brush. When they thought I wasn't looking, they exchanged complicit smiles. Mom, where do you want me to put these flowers? Michael asked, carrying an arrangement of white roses. On the center table, son. They're beautiful. Michael was a good man, a good father, a good son. He worked as an accountant at a respectable firm and had always been the most sensitive of my 3 children. He had no idea what his wife was doing behind his back, or mine. While I was arranging appetizers in the kitchen, I heard April talking on the phone in the garden. I moved closer to the window and could hear snippets of her conversation. The dress is perfect. It's going to be epic. After today, everything is going to change. No, he's completely on my side now. Epic. She was going to wear my wedding dress to my birthday party and considered it epic. The woman's coldness was terrifying. At 2 in the afternoon, when she went out to buy something, she had forgotten, I took the opportunity to check her purse, which she had left on the sofa. I found what I was looking for: text messages between her and Arthur. "Can't wait to see you in the dress again." One from Arthur read, "After today, she'll know who the real woman of this house is," April replied. "I love you, my queen," he wrote. My queen. The same words he had said to me that morning. I took pictures of all the messages with my phone, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from contained fury. When April returned, she found me in the living room reading a magazine, as if nothing had happened. "Everything okay, Abby? You look a little pale." "I'm perfect, dear. Just a little excited for the party. It's going to be a very revealing night." Her own smile now looked completely malicious. "Oh, really?" I replied, returning her smile. "Very revealing." At 3:00, Edward and Catherine arrived with their families. The house filled with voices, laughter, and the cheerful chaos of grandchildren running around. For a moment, I could almost pretend everything was normal, that we were still a happy family. But every time I saw Arthur and April exchange glances, reality hit me like a slap. This was my family, my house, my life, and they had turned it into a farce. At 5 p.m, as the first guests began to arrive, I excused myself and went up to my room to change. I put on my favorite black cocktail dress, carefully applied my makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the victim Arthur and April thought she was. She was a woman who had lived 65 years, who had raised 3 children, who had survived the death of her parents, her husband's illness, economic crises, and family tragedies. She was a survivor, and tonight she was going to show what she was made of. In my bedside table, I carefully placed the manila envelope I had prepared that morning. Inside were the photos of the messages, the evidence from the attic, and something else. Something that would make Arthur faint when he read it. Because there was one thing Patricia had discovered in her 2 hours of investigation, something that neither Arthur nor April knew that I knew. I came downstairs at 6:00 with the manila envelope hidden in my handbag. The sound of conversations and laughter filled the house, creating the perfect illusion of a happy family celebration. If I didn't know what I knew, it would have been the most beautiful birthday of my life. The living room was full of people: my sisters Rose and Catherine, my brothers-in-law, some dear neighbors, Arthur's colleagues from the bank where he had worked for 30 years before retiring. They had all come to celebrate my 65 years of life. What irony that it was the same day I would discover my marriage had died long ago. "There's the birthday girl," my sister Rose shouted, approaching with a glass of wine. "You look radiant, Abby." "Thanks, Rose," I replied, hugging her. My older sister had always been my confidant, but this time I couldn't tell her anything. Not yet. Arthur moved through the room like the perfect host, pouring drinks, telling jokes, greeting guests with that charming smile that had won over my entire family for 4 decades. He was wearing his dark gray suit, the same one he wore for special occasions, the same one he had probably taken off in the attic after defiling my wedding dress. "My wife looks beautiful tonight, don't you think?" he said to a group of his friends, gesturing to me from across the room. 65 years and more beautiful every day. The guests nodded and smiled. Some raised their glasses to me. I returned the gesture with a smile I had perfected over years of practice. The smile of the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect grandmother, The smile of a woman who knew how to keep up appearances no matter what she was feeling inside. But where was April? I scanned the room and found her in the kitchen, helping to serve appetizers. She was wearing the same navy blue dress from the morning, but had changed into high heels that made her look more imposing. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like what she was, a young, attractive woman, confident in her power over men. "Abby," she said as I approached, "everything is going perfectly. The guests are delighted." "Thank you, dear. You've been a great help." That's what family is for, isn't it? To support each other in important moments. The hypocrisy in her words was so thick I could almost cut it with a knife. Important moments, like when you decided to sleep with my husband in my own house. "Have you seen Michael?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "He's in the backyard with the kids. You know how he is, always making sure the little ones don't get hurt." Yes, I knew how my son was. Responsible, caring, faithful, everything the woman he married was not. At 7 p.m, when all the guests had arrived, Arthur asked for silence by gently tapping his glass with a spoon. The chime of the crystal cut through the conversations, and all eyes turned to him. "Friends, family," he began, with that deep voice that had always been his best tool of seduction. "We are here to celebrate the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. My wife, Abigail, turned 65 today, and I want everyone to know how lucky I feel to have shared 40 years of marriage with her." Applause, smiles, a few tears in my sister's eyes. I kept my expression serene, but inside, I felt like I was watching a horror movie. "Abby," he continued, addressing me directly, "you have been the best wife, the best mother, the best partner a man could ask for. You are the heart of this family, and we are all here because we love you." More applause. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" from the back of the room. April came over and hugged me by the shoulders, a radiant smile on her face. "It's so beautiful to see a marriage that has lasted so long," she said, loud enough for several guests to hear. "You two are an example for all of us, an example of what true love is." True love. The words made me nauseous. "Thank you, dear," I managed to reply. "You're also very special to this family." For the next hour, I was the perfect hostess. I spoke with every guest, thanked them for the gifts, and cut the chocolate cake Arthur had ordered from my favorite bakery. Everything seemed normal, perfect, exactly as the celebration of a matriarch surrounded by family love should be. But I watched every move, every gesture, every look between Arthur and April. It was like suddenly having superpowers, seeing things that had previously been hidden under the veil of my blind trust. When Arthur went to the drink table, April casually appeared beside him. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same bottle. When no one else was looking, he whispered something in her ear that made her smile in a way I had never seen before. It was intimate, secret, complicit. "Are you having fun, Mrs. Miller?" Patricia asked me. She had managed to slip into the party by pretending to be an old colleague from the hospital where I had been a nurse before getting married. "Immensely," I replied in a low voice. "Anything new?" "I've captured several interesting interactions. There's definitely something between them. But there's something else, Mrs. Miller. I've been watching their movements, and I think they're planning something for later tonight." "What kind of something?" "I'm not sure, but several times I've seen them look towards the stairs and whisper, as if they're waiting for the perfect moment for something." My stomach tightened. What else had they planned for tonight? At 8:30, When the party was at its peak, April disappeared. I told Patricia to follow her discreetly while I continued to entertain the guests. 15 minutes later, Patricia returned with a grave expression. "She went up to the attic," she whispered. "I think she's changing clothes." "The dress. She was putting on your wedding dress. How much time do you need to get everything ready?" I asked her. "Give me 10 minutes. I already have everything ready in the car." While Patricia slipped out the back door, I continued to mingle with my guests, but my heart was beating so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This was the moment. Everything I had been waiting and planning for was about to happen. Arthur approached me with a strange smile on his face. "My love, are you ready for your special surprise?" "What surprise?" I asked, feigning innocent curiosity. "You'll see. It's going to be something you'll never forget." He was right about that, but not in the way he imagined. At 9 o'clock, Arthur asked for silence again. This time, there was something different in his demeanor, a nervous excitement, like a child about to pull a prank who can't contain his glee. "Friends," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "we have a very special surprise for Abigail, something that will make tonight truly memorable." I looked towards the stairs and saw April beginning to descend. She was wearing my wedding dress. The guests let out gasps of astonishment and confusion. Some clapped, thinking it was part of some nostalgic performance. Others frowned, not understanding what was happening. April walked to the center of the room with the confidence of a runway model. The dress fit her perfectly, as if it had been made for her. She smiled with triumph, with malice, with a satisfaction that filled me with an icy fury. "Dear mother-in-law," she said, her voice cutting through Cain, Therium, the stunned silence of the room. "I wanted to pay tribute to your beautiful marriage by wearing the most important dress of your life. I hope you don't mind that a younger woman wears it better than you do." A murmur of shock rippled through the room. Several people exchanged uncomfortable glances. My sister Rose stood up, clearly annoyed. "April, what the hell are you doing?" Michael asked, quickly approaching from the backyard where he had been with the kids. But I said nothing. I smiled, a cold, calculated smile that made April blink with uncertainty for the first time all night. "You look lovely, dear," I finally said, my voice filling the tense silence. "That dress has a very interesting history, and since we're on the subject of stories, I think now is the perfect time to share a few truths with all our dear guests." I pulled the manila envelope from my purse. April's triumphant smile vanished completely. The silence in the room was so thick I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. All eyes were fixed on me, some confused, others clearly uncomfortable with the tension that had appeared out of nowhere. April was still standing in the center of the room, my wedding dress shimmering under the dining room lights. But her look of triumph had been replaced by something that looked dangerously like fear. Arthur cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Abigail, dear, why don't you save that for later? It's your party. We should be celebrating." "Oh, but Arthur," I replied, maintaining my icy smile, "there's no better time to celebrate the truth than at a family party. After all, family is the most important thing, isn't it?" I looked directly at April, who had started to back away slowly towards the wall. The dress she thought would be her weapon of humiliation now seemed more like a costume that made her look ridiculous and pathetic. "You see," I continued, raising my voice enough for all the guests to hear me clearly, I discovered something very interesting yesterday, something that made me see my life from a completely new perspective. My sister Rose came closer, concern evident on her face. "Abby, are you okay? You look very pale." "I'm perfect, Rose. In fact, I've never felt more clear-headed." I opened the manila envelope and took out the first set of photographs. "Do you know why April decided to wear my wedding dress tonight? It's not because she wants to honor me. It's because yesterday she tried it on in the attic of my house along with my husband." A collective gasp went through the room. Several people stood up, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing the gravity of the moment. "Mom, what are you saying?" my son Edward asked, approaching with a frown. "I'm saying that your father and your sister-in-law have been having an affair in our own home." My voice was clear, firm, without the slightest tremor. "And they decided to use my birthday as the perfect stage for their final humiliation." Michael froze, halfway between the garden door and the center of the room. His face had lost all its color, and his eyes darted from April to Arthur, as if trying to process information his mind refused to accept. "That's a lie," April shouted, but her voice sounded high-pitched and desperate. "She's making things up because she's jealous that I look better in her dress." "Jealous?" I repeated, letting out a laugh that had no trace of humor. "My dear, I spent 40 years believing I was the luckiest woman in the world to be married to Arthur. Why would I be jealous of a woman who settles for the scraps of my marriage?" I held up the first photographs, images of the wrinkled dress in the attic, of Arthur's handkerchief lying on the floor, of the strands of blonde hair Patricia had found in the lace. "These pictures were taken yesterday afternoon," I explained, passing the images among the guests, after I overheard April and Arthur planning this little performance for tonight. Arthur finally found his voice, but it sounded hoarse and shaky. "Abigail, this is a misunderstanding. I can explain everything." "A misunderstanding?" My voice rose for the first time all night. "You call this a misunderstanding?" I pulled out the next pieces of evidence, the screenshots of the text messages between them. I passed them around in silence, one by one, to the nearest guests. I could see their faces changing as they read the intimate words, the declarations of love, the plans to humiliate me. My sister Catherine read one of the messages aloud, her voice trembling with indignation. "Can't wait to see you in the dress again. After today, she'll know who the real woman of this house is." A choked sob came from the other side of the room. It was Mrs. Martinez, our neighbor of over 20 years, who was holding another message with trembling hands. "Arthur," she read in a broken voice, "I love you, my queen. It's time for things to change around here." "Stop it," April screamed, rushing towards me with clenched fists. But Michael stopped her, grabbing her by the arms. His eyes were filled with tears and a fury I had never seen in my youngest son. "Is it true?" he asked his wife, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell me it's not true, April." April looked him in the eyes, and for a moment I thought she would deny everything, that she would try to manipulate the situation once more. But instead, her mask finally crumbled completely. "So, what if it is?" she shrieked, breaking free from Michael's grasp. "Do you think it was easy being married to you, with your obsession with pleasing this bitter old woman? Arthur values me. He appreciates me. He makes me feel like a real woman." The silence that followed her words was devastating. Michael stumbled back as if he had been physically struck. But I wasn't finished. I pulled the last set of evidence from the envelope, the one I had been saving for the end. But that's not all, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a razor, because you see, when a 65-year-old woman discovers her entire life has been a lie, she takes the time to investigate thoroughly. Arthur, who had been motionless for the last few minutes, finally moved. He approached me with hesitant steps, as if walking on quicksand. Abigail, please, we can talk about this in private, not in front of all these people. In private? I repeated, looking at him with a coldness that made him flinch. Like all the private conversations you've had with my daughter-in-law for the past few months? No, Arthur, this conversation is going to be as public as your betrayal. I took out the last document from the envelope. It was a medical form with the letterhead of City General Hospital. Do you know what this is, Arthur? I asked, holding the paper high. He squinted, trying to read from a distance, but I could see the exact moment he recognized what it was. His face turned the color of ash. It's a medical report, I continued, my voice filling every corner of the room. A pregnancy report, to be exact, dated 3 weeks ago. Audible gasps filled the room. Several women covered their mouths. The men exchanged looks of horror. Whose report is it, you ask? I said, pausing for the full weight of my words to land. April's, of course. She's 8 weeks pregnant. Michael swayed as if someone had punched him in the stomach. April let out a sharp cry, more of terror than surprise. But I wasn't done. The final blow was yet to come. And before anyone thinks this baby could be Michael's, I continued, pulling out another document. I have here the results of the fertility test Michael took 6 months ago when you two were trying to have another baby. The reports that show Michael is sterile due to an infection he had as a teenager. Arthur grabbed the wall to keep from falling. His breathing had become labored, and beads of sweat ran down his forehead. Do you understand what this means? I asked, my voice now resonating with an authority I had never felt before. It means the baby April is carrying can only belong to one person, my 68-year-old husband, her husband's father, her daughter's grandfather. The room exploded in shouts, exclamations of horror, and chairs scraping against the floor as people abruptly stood up. But I kept my focus on Arthur, who had started to hyperventilate. Arthur, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos like a sword, do you have anything to say about your grandchild, who is also going to be your child? That's when he collapsed. His legs gave out from under him, and he hit the floor with a dull thud that made several women scream. But even as Edward and Michael rushed to help him, I remained standing, motionless, holding the evidence of the complete destruction of my family. And for the first time in 40 years, I felt completely free. The chaos that followed Arthur's collapse was like watching a bomb explode in slow motion. Edward and Michael knelt beside their father, trying to revive him, while women screamed and men muttered words of shock and disgust. Some guests began to slip out the door, clearly uncomfortable being witnesses to this family implosion. But I remained motionless in the center of it all, still holding the evidence in my hands, feeling a strange, inexplicable calm. It was as if I had been holding my breath for decades and could finally exhale. Mom, call an ambulance, Edward shouted, loosening Arthur's tie while Michael patted his cheeks, trying to wake him. No, I said, my voice cutting through the panic like a knife. He's not going to die. He's just in shock because someone finally told him the truth to his face. April had rushed to Arthur's side, the wedding dress dragging on the floor as she knelt beside him, Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfectly applied makeup. "Arthur, please wake up, please." "How sweet," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "The concerned mistress. Very touching, really." "That's enough," Michael shouted, getting to his feet and confronting me for the first time all night. His eyes were red from crying, his face contorted in pain. "You've said enough. You just destroyed our entire family." "I destroyed the family?" I repeated, turning to my youngest son with genuine disbelief. "Michael, your wife is pregnant with your father's child. How is that my fault?" "Because you could have handled this privately. You didn't have to humiliate us in front of all our friends and family." I stared at him for a long moment. This son of mine, whom I had raised with so much love, whom I had protected from every hurt and disappointment I could. And I realized that even now, even with all the evidence in front of him, his instinct was to protect those who had betrayed him, rather than support the mother who had dedicated her entire life to him. "You know what, Michael?" I said finally, my voice softer now, but somehow more terrifying. "You're right. I could have handled this privately. I could have confronted your father and your wife quietly. I could have been the discreet, submissive woman I've been for 40 years. But do you know why I didn't?" Arthur had begun to stir, groaning and trying to sit up with Edward's help. His eyes moved disoriented around the room until they finally landed on me. In that moment, I saw something I had never seen before in my husband's eyes. Genuine fear. "I didn't do it," I continued, my voice filling the space as the last guests scurried out the door, "because I realized something important yesterday. I realized that I had spent 65 years of my life worrying about everyone else's feelings except my own." My sister Rose approached, her eyes full of tears. "Abby, honey, we understand you're hurt, but maybe we should—" "Maybe what, Rose?" I interrupted her. "Maybe I should forgive and forget? Maybe I should pretend nothing happened? Maybe I should continue being the perfect wife who keeps the family peace no matter the personal cost?" I looked around the room at the faces of the people who had been my world for decades. Edward, my eldest, seemed torn between loyalty to his father and horror at what he had discovered. Catherine, my daughter-in-law, was keeping the children in the backyard, shielding them from witnessing more of this disaster. Michael was crying openly, torn apart by his wife's betrayal and the confusion of not knowing how to feel. And Arthur, my husband of 40 years, looked at me from the floor as if I were a dangerous animal he didn't know how to handle. "But there's more," I said, pulling another set of documents from the seemingly bottomless envelope. Because when a woman finally decides to investigate the life she thought she knew, she sometimes discovers that the betrayal runs much deeper than she imagined. Arthur tried to stand up, but Edward held him in the chair where they had placed him. "Abigail, please, that's enough. You've made your point." "My point?" I repeated, feeling genuinely amused for the first time that night. "Arthur, I haven't even begun to make my point. You see, when Patricia started looking into your little affair with April, we decided to dig a little deeper, and we discovered some very interesting things about our family finances." The color that had returned to Arthur's face drained away again. "For example," I continued, unfolding a bank statement, "we discovered that for the last 8 months, you've been transferring $1,500 a month from our joint savings account to an account you secretly opened in April's name." Gasps filled the room. Even the few remaining guests leaned forward to hear better. $12,000, I said, letting the figure hang in the air. $12,000 from the savings we built together over 4 decades, transferred to your pregnant mistress without my knowledge or consent. That's not true, Arthur stammered, but his voice had no conviction. Not true, I repeated, walking over and planting myself directly in front of his chair. Then how do you explain this? I showed him the statement, with the transfers clearly marked, date by date, amount by amount, each transfer made on the 15th of the month, right after my retired nurse's pension check arrived. Michael came over and took the document from my hands, his eyes scanning the figures, his face twisted with a new wave of pain and fury. Dad, he whispered, this was the money you were going to use for Sophia's college fund, the money you promised for your granddaughter's education. My 8-year-old granddaughter, the innocent little girl sleeping upstairs, oblivious to the fact that her world was being destroyed floor by floor beneath her. And that's not all, I continued, because now that I had started, I couldn't stop. 40 years of silence were pouring out like a broken dam. We also discovered that you've been using our joint credit card to pay for romantic dinners, hotels, jewelry, $7,000 in expenses related to your affair in the last 6 months. I showed the receipts one by one. Dinners at expensive restaurants, a $2,000 gold bracelet, a stay at a boutique hotel on the day of our 39th wedding anniversary. On our anniversary, I repeated, my voice cracking slightly for the first time. The day you told me you had to work late at the bank, you were in a hotel with her. April, who had been silent for several minutes, finally found her voice. Abigail, you don't understand. Arthur and I, this wasn't something we planned. It just happened. I turned to her, this woman wearing my wedding dress while defending her betrayal. It just happened. For 8 months, with a pregnancy included. That just happened. We love each other, she shouted, staggering to her feet. The dress, which had seemed so perfect at the beginning of the night, now looked wrinkled and out of place. Something you obviously don't understand. Love, I repeated, and this time I did laugh, a long, bitter laugh that made several guests step back. You call destroying a family love, stealing money, getting pregnant by your husband's father? He's a better man than Michael will ever be, April screamed, completely out of control now. Michael is weak, boring, predictable. Arthur makes me feel alive. The silence that followed her words was absolute. Michael stood frozen, as if he'd been shot. Edward closed his eyes, shaking his head. Even Arthur looked horrified by what his mistress had just said. Well, I said finally, my voice calm again. Thank you for clearing that up, April. Now we all know exactly what kind of person you are. I walked to the table where I'd left my purse and took out one last document. And now, I said, we come to the part that's really going to interest everyone. Arthur tried to stand again, but this time Edward didn't stop him. He managed to make his way to me with faltering steps. Abigail, he whispered, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can work this out, I repeated, looking at him with an expression that made him recoil. Arthur, this doesn't get worked out. This gets ended. I opened the last document, and a cold smile spread across my face. This, I said, holding the paper up for everyone to see, is my birthday present to myself. A petition for divorce, already filed and processed, for cause, of course. Arthur swayed as if he'd been struck. No, You can't." "Oh, but I can," I replied. "And not only that, I've also taken a few other preventative measures, like freezing all our joint accounts until the court can determine exactly how much money you've stolen, like hiring the best divorce attorneys in the city, like documenting every single cent you spent on your affair." I looked directly into his eyes, seeing in them the complete panic of a man who had just realized he had lost everything. "Happy 65th birthday to me," I said. "The day I finally decided to stand up for myself." 6 months later, I sat on the deck of my new house, a small but beautiful 2-bedroom home on the quiet side of town, sipping my morning coffee while reading the news on my tablet. The April sun filtered through the trees in my garden, which I had planted myself the week before. Roses, jasmine, and tulips, all the flowers I had wanted to plant for years, but Arthur had always said were too much work. How wrong he had been. There was no work in creating something beautiful for yourself. The divorce had been finalized the previous week. 40 years of marriage officially ended with a judge's signature and a division of assets that was more generous to me than Arthur had expected. His documented affairs and the theft of our savings had played in my favor in ways even my lawyer hadn't anticipated. I got the original house, which I sold immediately, and used the money to buy this new property, mortgage-free. I also received half of his bank pension and compensation for the funds he had illegally transferred to April. All told, I had more money than I'd had in years, and for the first time in my life, every cent was completely mine. The doorbell pulled me from my thoughts. Through the window, I could see Edward standing on my porch, holding a box and looking uncomfortable. For the past few months, my relationships with my children had been complicated. "Hi, Mom," he said, when I opened the door, avoiding my gaze. "I brought some of your things that were left at the old house. Dad finally packed them up." The old house. That's how everyone referred to the home I had lived in for 4 decades now, as if it had been infected with some disease no one wanted to name. "Thank you, Edward. Do you want to come in? I just made coffee." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I led him to the kitchen, where I poured coffee into the new cups I had bought. Delicate white porcelain with blue flowers, completely different from the practical, boring dinnerware I had used for years. "The house looks nice," he said, looking around with genuine surprise. "It looks cheerful." "I feel cheerful," I replied, and it was the truth. "How's your father?" Edward sighed, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "Not great. He's living in a small apartment downtown. Had to get a part-time job at a hardware store to pay the rent." I didn't feel a shred of malicious satisfaction hearing this. It was simply a fact, like the weather or the price of gas, the natural consequences of the choices Arthur had made. And April? She moved back in with her parents after Michael filed for divorce. The baby's due in August. Michael, my youngest, who had taken 3 months to speak to me after the party, had been furious with me for ruining his marriage, as if I had been the one to have the affair. But eventually, as the reality of April's betrayal fully set in, he had come to apologize. "And Sophia?" I asked, because my granddaughter was the only innocent victim in this whole mess. "She's okay, confused, of course, but she's adjusting. Michael is thinking about moving out here, closer to you. He says Sophia needs stability, and you're the only one who can give it to her now." This surprised me. For months, I had assumed my children would forever blame me for exposing the truth in such a public and devastating way. Edward, I said, putting my cup down, I know what I did on my birthday was hard for the whole family, but I need you to understand something. He looked up, his eyes so much like mine. If I had handled this privately, if I had confronted your father and April quietly, do you think they would have stopped? Do you think they would have ended the affair and been genuinely sorry? Edward considered this for a long moment. Probably not, he finally admitted. And Michael would have never known the truth about his wife. He would have gone on living a lie, raising a baby that wasn't his, wondering why he felt like a stranger in his own marriage. You're right, he said quietly. It was just so brutal, Mom. Seeing Dad collapse like that, watching the whole family fall apart in one night. Sometimes, I replied, the truth is brutal, but it's more brutal to live a lie for decades. We finished our coffee in a more comfortable silence, and when Edward left, he promised to bring Sophia to visit on the weekend. It was a start. That afternoon, while sorting through the things Edward had brought, I found something that made me pause. A photograph from my wedding 40 years ago. Arthur and I looked so young, so hopeful. I was wearing the dress that April had desecrated, smiling with a joy I thought would last forever. For a moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been sadness. Not for Arthur, not for the marriage I had lost, but for the woman in that picture. The woman who had believed in fairy tales and happy endings. The woman who had thought love was enough to sustain an entire life. But then I looked around my new home, filled with things I had chosen, decorated to my taste, silent when I wanted silence, and filled with music when I wanted music. I looked at my calendar, full of activities I had chosen, painting classes on Tuesdays, book club on Thursdays, dinners with my sisters whenever I felt like it. And I realized I didn't feel sadness for that young woman in the photograph. I felt pride for the woman she had become. 2 weeks later, I was in my garden planting a new row of sunflowers when I heard familiar voices. Michael had arrived with Sophia, just as he had promised. "Grandma," Sophia shouted, running towards me with open arms. At 8 years old, she had inherited my stubbornness and Michael's smile. But there was a wisdom in her eyes that broke my heart. "Hello, my love," I said, hugging her tightly. "How's my favorite granddaughter?" "I'm your only granddaughter," she replied with the relentless logic of children. "Grandma, is it true that Grandpa Arthur is going to have a baby with Mommy?" Michael, who had been greeting me quietly, tensed up. We had discussed how to handle these inevitable questions. "Yes, sweetie," I replied, kneeling down to her level. "It is. Does that mean the baby will be my brother and my uncle at the same time?" The simplicity of the question was devastating. "Something like that," I managed to reply. Sophia considered this for a moment. Then she shrugged with the infinite resilience of childhood. "That's okay. I'd rather live with you and Daddy anyway. Mommy was always yelling." Michael and I exchanged a look over her head. Children see more than adults think. That night, after Michael and Sophia left, I sat on my deck again with a glass of red wine. The wine was expensive, from California, something I never would have allowed myself during my marriage. Arthur had always said expensive wine was a waste of money. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I decided to answer. "Abigail." It was Arthur's voice, sounding older and more tired than I remembered. "What do you want, Arthur?" I just wanted to know how you are." "I'm fine. Very well, in fact. There was a long pause. Abigail, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything that happened. I waited, but he said nothing more. Is that all? I finally asked. What else can I say? I ruined everything. I lost my family. I lost my home. I lost my dignity. And worst of all, I lost the best woman I've ever known. Arthur, I said, surprised by the calm in my own voice. You didn't lose me. You threw me away. There's a difference. You're right, he whispered. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked up at the stars, twinkling above my garden, thinking about the question. Could I forgive him? Maybe. Eventually. Resentment was heavy, and I had spent too many years carrying burdens that weren't mine. Maybe someday, I said finally. But that doesn't mean I want to see you or speak to you again. It means that someday I'll stop carrying the pain you caused me. I understand, he said, and for the first time in 40 years, he sounded like he actually did. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my new life. There was no TV blaring too loud, no snoring, no derogatory comments disguised as jokes, just peace. At 65, I had finally learned the difference between being alone and being free. And, for the first time in my life, I was completely, utterly free. The following month, April gave birth to a baby boy. Arthur is working 2 jobs to pay child support. Michael moved 3 blocks from my house and brings Sophia over for lunch with me every Sunday. And I just keep planting flowers, reading books, drinking expensive wine, and discovering who I am when no one else is defining me. Turns out, she's someone I really like getting to know.